Juliana and Julio, and they will show us a managerial application of CNA. Please.
So hi everyone again, and yes, indeed, I'm joined by Julio, who was my former student and now owns this company called Techni Methods, and one of the examples comes from the application of the method at his company, and also Juliana is a very accomplished researcher, colleague of mine in marketing research, so consumer behavior, and she has helped me like frame the problems and identify the factors because most of them come from marketing applications. So our main goal with this presentation was to exemplify how maybe CNA could be used not only for research purposes, but also, for instance, to support decision making in business contexts. So I will give you 3 examples, and then in the end we will reflect about some challenges that we face when we try to apply the method in these contexts and some suggestions for future development. So I won't enter into too much technical detail for each of the analysis because they are more to exemplify, but yeah, I would be happy to discuss any more technicality issue during the Q&A. So let's start with an example from sales. That's the example done in Techni Methods. So we had, Julio has a product that is an innovative MBA course that has a different business model proposal in relation to the other types of MBA courses that are sold in Brazil. So he was trying to sell this course, and there were 39 potential clients slash sponsors because it's a kind of sale that's B2B, that is business to business. So basically he searched for companies that are willing to sponsor the MBA course, and then if they sponsor the MBA course, they get slots for employees in that course. So these were the cases that he had approached over the last months before the analysis, and the outcomes were the positive and the negative poles of a same factor that in Portuguese is called venda, and it means sale. So whether or not the company decided to sponsor the MBA course, that was the outcome. And as you can see, it's very, very, very imbalanced. So 13% of the cases decided to sponsor the course, and 87% decided not to sponsor the course. And then I, as a methodologist, I told him, no, that's a constant, we cannot analyze it. And he said to me, no, that's not a constant, I have 5 clients, you know? So you have to analyze it. So indeed, that's the kind of backup that we, yeah, so that's the kind of reaction that we receive when we are not in a research context. For him, these 5 cases really have something that made the difference for that. So I knew already about like the adjusted measure, so I wanted to give it a try. And we discussed based on his opinions as an expert salesperson, which could be potential cause factors by means of his impressions in these interactions, and we had like 9 hypothetical clues about what could be difference makers. So whether or not the person had taken part in the podcast that they also have, whether or not the interaction was in person, whether or not the person had heard the pitch about the MBA course, and so on and so forth. So some factors, for instance, if the C-level, by which we mean CEO, CFO, the top management team was involved in the negotiation or not, etc. And of course, we are sure that there were some other unmeasured factors, so we are not supposing to have causal homogeneity plausibly in this case, but that's what we had. So to have a quick analysis, we decided to calibrate it as a crisp set. That's also one point. I mean, he wouldn't be happy to wait too much, like over tons of discussions of what would be the best calibration. He would like to see, okay, give me a result and let me see if that makes sense. If not, then we will keep the conversation. So we had to have like a quick first result to show. So I use the FR scoring approach. One thing that I'm doing a lot in my last analysis is to vary the range, and I start with a very short range to get like the overfitted models and to see how they behave, and then I go lower with the lower value. But another thing about practical applications is that Julio wouldn't be happy if I say to him, okay, you are misfiring more than 25% of the times with this model. So I would never go below 75, because if I get a model that, okay, based on other criteria, it would be a good model, but he would tell me, but to have a model that misfires more than 75% of, more than 25% of the time, I prefer to rely on my gut instinct, because I know more than I can measure, you know. So yeah, granularity was like this. I used the adjusted measures, and one thing that I'm also doing in all my analysis now is to treat faithfulness as like a necessary criterion for model selection, in the sense that I would never select a model that has a very low value for faithfulness, and that came through my interactions with business people, because again, in one of the cases that I will show later, I presented the model that after a lot of analysis I came to trust that was the best model to the person in the company, and the person said, okay, well, yes, it scores highs in everything, but what's this last column here, like faithfulness, because it's 0.5? And then I said, yeah, well, let me remember. Okay, faithfulness means that 50% of the cases of the configurations that are in your data set are incompatible with this model. And the person was looking at me like, okay, so you're suggesting that I should select a model for which 50% of the configurations in my data set are incompatible with that. So then it started me that maybe, yes, for real world applications in which people would take decisions based on the model, maybe I should take care with faithfulness. And lastly, I also like to explore, as you know, the submodel network visualizations of the result of FR score, and make some calculations not only of node degree, which is the current FR score measure, but also of other measures that try to measure node centrality in a network instead of just counting the edges of that node. So, I mean, to show the result. So my first decision was that as prevalence was very low, in the sense that we had only 5 cases of the positive outcome, then I would prioritize high model fit, especially the standard coverage, because it wouldn't make sense to select a model that wouldn't explain, for instance, 2 of the 5 cases. So yeah, I would like to have a model that would explain all, or at least 4 of the 4 cases of sale. And then this is the result of the FR score. As you can see, we have lots of models that do not score more than 0 in the FR score. And we have here some basic models that had submodel relationships with other models as well. So if you look at the degree is the area of the node, so that's the FR score raw value. But also I've calculated betweenness. Betweenness is an index of node centrality in network analysis. And there are many critiques in network analysis theory about measuring importance based on degree. So I wanted to experiment with some other measures that they've developed in this other field to assess, based on a network visualization, where are the most important nodes. But in this case, and Velpecker told me that with his simulations, things do not seem to change too much depending on your measure. And here indeed, this model is both the one with the highest degree and the one with the highest betweenness, so it seems a good model to select. And this one also seems good, and this also seems to be a good model. So I was okay, so that's what I have for the positive outcome. But the one thing that I'm also doing all the time now is to check, even if Julio was not interested, for instance, in what causes the non-sale, I'm always checking for the negative and trying to see if the negated models of the ones that I would select for the positive appear as highly plausible models for the negated outcome as well. So here, when I ran the analysis for non-sale, then the results were not very conclusive, but I decided to prioritize negated models. And you can see that because, okay, there are some models that did not score anything in the fit robustness, so okay, this is fine. But then you can see that we have two separate clusters of models. So it seems that at this point, with the number of cases that Julio had and the factors that we had, the way calibration was made, we did not have evidence enough yet to see if things were going more to this side or more to that side in terms of what explains non-sale. But yeah, it will be probably too small for you, but that this model here is exactly the negation of the most appropriate model that I thought from the previous analysis. So and it's still good. I mean, it's the second highest. It's the model that scores second highest in terms of betweenness and degree. This one here, that would be a good option, but it didn't make too much sense for us why podcast would be the positive podcast would be included as a qualifier in the explanation. So yeah, I prioritized the negated model. But I also saw that the model that would be the most recommendable possible in this other cluster, this other model was also the negation, the negation of the this model here, that would be one good option also for the positive outcome. So in the end, we had two possible explanations. So the one that's the simplest, and usually business people like simple models, but also like the best fitting models. Okay, not only the simplest, but the best fitting model would be those models here. So if the interaction was in person, or the person was sympathetic to the value that was proposed, then the sale occurred, and the opposite led to no sale. So the interaction was not in person, and or the person was not sympathetic to the proposal that was first presented. So yeah, so this is symmetric, and they were both highly fitted models for both positive and negative outcomes. And if you take a look at the second option here, then you see that apart from the podcast qualifying these condition here, but if you take if you remove podcast, for instance, just to visualize it better, you see that what leads to the sale is the negation of what leads to no sale. So it seems that something is going on, and we didn't quite understand yet why podcast was qualifying this value here. But in the end, to Julio it made sense. He looked at this and he said, okay, this makes sense to me, so now I will change my sale strategy, so I won't spend too much time trying to reach too many people and making online interactions. I will prioritize a few number of people in-person interactions and to talk to people that I think will see the value of the proposal, and not trying to talk to people that will tell someone else of the value of the proposal. And it seems to have worked. Yeah. Yeah. So here, for instance, it wouldn't make sense if the interest would be to sell the MBA, to invite someone to the podcast if you cannot involve anyone else from the company in the after podcast sale. So yeah, so I was quite reluctant to tell him to take decisions based on the analysis, but I mean, people take decisions independently of whether or not we analyze something. And I was at least more confident to tell him that he could trust in this than in all the other models, or even in his guess, his gut feeling that he had before. And one last point about this is that now Julio knows what he has to look for in the next interactions to get the chance of making the models better in the future. So now he pays attention, because each interaction for him is not only an opportunity to sell a product, but also an opportunity to make his data set better for future learning. Well, we have another in progress analysis at Techni for the whole product portfolio. So here we have like the factors that the top management team at Techni take into account as being important strategic factors for them, and each line represents one of their main product lines. So the first product line, for instance, is one that provides synergy with other business units, scalability, alignment with the goals of the company, high potential of social impact, profitability, etc., etc. Of course, there are some constant factors here that were excluded, but you can see also that it's quite imbalanced again, as most of the real-world business data sets that I've encountered up to now. So yeah, but then here it was very interesting, because we had all the top management team members doing their assessments separately, individually first, so how they would score each product in each of these variables, and then we had like the aggregate measures representing like the collective view of the team. And yeah, it was very interesting to me, using more or less the same approach than before, like FR scoring with multiple fit ranges, faithfulness over 2/3, I think, to obtain a model that I think made a lot of sense to Julio. And indeed, in this case, I'm not showing like every detail, but the model really came to the top as like the most robust model and with good fit measures. So you can see that there are basically two ways for the product portfolio. So one involves a lot of effort. So it's this left side of the model. So these are products for which they have to make a lot of investment and to put a lot of people to work, etc. And yeah, but at the same time, these are the products that lead to a greater profitability or higher profitability, of course, because you're investing a lot, so you're probably charging a lot also your client. And at the same time, these are the products that are most complex. so the scope is not simple. But the thing is that it leads to a trade-off, because on the other hand, the simple projects are the one that, in terms of margin, have the greatest margin, and at the same time, the ones that are not very profitable tend to be very complex. So this is one side of the thing, that for products that are based on a lot of effort, so this is the trade-off. And if you look to the right hand side, then you have scale and synergy in a trade-off as well. So for products for which there is not a need of putting in too much effort, then synergy and scale are trading off among them. So that's why business is difficult, because if you go well in one of your criterion, then probably you won't go too well in another important strategic criterion. But this is still an in-progress analysis. It was just to finish like the Techni example. So now one example from customer experience, which is the field in which Juliana is most known for her studies. So this is a big health insurance company in Brazil, and they wanted to understand more the net promoter score of their new clients. So NPS, I think most of you have seen already, right? Is to what extent would you recommend this service to another person? So it's a 10-point scale, and yeah, you can either be a promoter, neutral, or detractor. But I took the whole scale as my raw data, and potential cause factors. Then we are limited by what the company collects, of course. So we can just say, okay, that there is this factor that's theoretically relevant. Let's measure it. They won't do it. I mean, they have a big corporate data set, and you have to work with the factors that are there. So once more, I'm not trying to make causal homogeneity plausible in the first place, because I have to work with the factors that they are measuring. And so there were 8 from customer satisfaction survey and 4 from demographics. All of them I treated as crisp set for the same reasons again, and also to reduce imbalances with some multi-value categories that would have very few cases. So I tried to work with crisp sets so that the imbalances wouldn't be too high. And again, more or less the same approach. FR scoring, the measures, faithfulness, submodel visualizations, and prioritization of compatible models between the positive and negative outcome analysis. So this is interesting. Again, I'm not showing like the whole process of model selection, but I mean, if you can trust me, I would say that these models, probably everyone in the room would select these 3 models if I shown you the results of the FR score. And you can see that these 3 models that were the ones that I was in doubt between them, these 3, they stand in a sub-model relation. So I've marked here in red what's repeating in the underlying in the models that are more to the bottom, and here with yellow the other causal ascriptions that are repeating in the last model. So, and if you look like to the model fit measures, then again the last one is scored high, but not overfitting too much, but scored high in every different type of measure of sufficiency and coverage. Whereas, for instance, the first model had a very low standard consistency value. And again, when I presented this to the manager, she said to me, well, I prefer the last one because as a manager, I have to take care as much as possible of all the conditions that could lead to the result, in the sense that she prefers a little bit overfitting. She prefers the risk of overfitting than of underfitting, which for research purposes we try to balance both. But for business, usually they don't want to make a mistake, so they prefer to be a little bit more overfitted. And indeed, we selected then this last module. And when I ran for the other factor value, that in this case was the positive one, so in her case, she was interested in the negative outcome, why people are not promoting the service. So this was the main outcome of interest. So when I ran for the negative, in this case, NPS 1, promoting clients, then I summarized here, but you would be able to see that it stands in a negated relation to the models that are positive, in the sense that, for instance, motive and attention here are in a conjunction, but if you look in all the models, the value is negated and they will be always in separate paths. Okay, so for one here they are on the same path, and then in the negated they are always on different paths, and the value is always negated. It's never the same value. So that brought a little more confidence to select that model. And if you look again at the specific measures, then the simplest model was excluded because of standard consistency, as I have said, and also because of faithfulness. And I must admit, I can talk more about that maybe later, that I don't care that much about exhaustiveness. So to me, for instance, I would give a low weight to exhaustiveness and a high weight to faithfulness. And you can see that the last model scores higher in everything except for exhaustiveness, which would be expected because it's a more complex model as well. So this is the person that when I've shown this result, she asked me what faithfulness meant, and because I was suggesting model 1, okay, and you can see that model 1 scores high, like in most of the measures, and still faithfulness is low. And in the prevalence adjusted measure, it scored above 80. So I mean, the standard one was capturing more the behavior of faithfulness here. Okay. Now we are doing the same analysis, but for another business unit of the health plan insurance company. So that was the analysis for the clinics, and now we are doing for emergency care. And yeah, so there are things that are similar. So for instance, the motive is always in conjunction with some measure of effort, as it is on this path in the original model. So this is showing up. But whereas while in the clinic, attention and infrastructure were together on the same path, now they are on different paths. So they are disjunctively connected. So this was interesting as well, because it's showing that the behavior of customers in terms of promoting or not promoting the health service depends on the context of how they were treated, in what kind of consultation. Was it in an emergency care, or was it in at a clinic? So that's where we are now, and we have 7 business units to analyze, so these are 2 of them. And again, there are implications. So she is now establishing a new training process for her employees based on these results. Because I mean, I can't enter into too much details, but attention at the reception and also during the service proved to be like a way to counterbalance if the person had to make a lot of effort to get in touch and to make an appointment with the health insurance company. So she's kind of training people on how to give a better attention to the clients, especially the ones that had to spend a lot of time getting in touch and making the appointment for the consultation. And a last example, again from, in this case from marketing. So the outcome of interest was mother's intention or lack thereof to buy second-hand products for their children. So this was a more socially oriented kind of work. And there were many potential cause factors, so 10 multi-item constructs from theoretical background, 6 from demographics. A large survey was conducted with more than 1,000 mothers. We tried calibration in multiple ways, like absolute, relative, fuzzy, crispy, FR score, and a whole procedure on how to select it. I can come back to that later. And also some model selection criteria. So these were the models that we've obtained. So here we have some models for the intention of purchase. So what explains a mother willing to purchase second-hand products for her children. And then we had a split sample design. So we have explanations for mothers who have already purchased, for mothers who have never purchased before, and then for all mothers taken together to see if the explanations would change based on this stratification of the sample. And then the explanation for the negative, which would be the lack of intention to purchase, again, for the same groups. And here we have either the absolute calibration and the relative. So it's easier to explain the relative. The relative is for this specific sample of mothers, what would explain differences between them, whereas the absolute is measures that would be valid for any other sample as well. So of course I don't want to enter into the details of every solution, but that's just to say that many managerial implications, if you analyze like the patterns that appear there, many managerial implications could be thought of in terms of marketing strategies of these kinds of companies that are specializing in selling second-hand products for children. So for instance, actions aimed at encouraging mothers who already have the intention to purchase may differ from those targeting mothers who do not. So, I mean, this may seem a little bit obvious, but there was no company that was producing like two different marketing strategies, one for mothers that were already convinced that this was a good thing to do, and mothers who were not. And considering the predominance of economic motivations and the prominent role of price awareness in the solutions taken together, second-hand shops should create strategies to highlight the savings involved. So these appear to be very relevant, like the consciousness that you're saving money, not only yours, but also like for the whole economy, in the sense that you're preventing costs that wouldn't be needed. It was qualifying many of the causal paths, and so there were very practical suggestions, such as simple tags showing a comparison between the estimated prices and how much the mother was really paying for that product, showing customers on their receipt the amount, the total amount saved and what could be done with that amount, etc. So these are very practical, like managerial implications that again, of course, may seem a bit obvious, but the point is the confidence to do that, because all of this involves like people working, costs being paid, and so you want to do that if there is any reasoning behind backing this strategy, and there was for these companies, there was a reasoning for that. And finally, the relevance of subjective norms. So this was, when I say this, it seems that I'm talking about a factor, but I'm not talking about a factor, okay? I'm talking about conjunctions that were causal paths. and some causal paths were all related to subjective norm factor values. And by this we mean that the mothers always take into account what other mothers would think, or what their mothers would think, or etc., what their peers would think about this kind of consuming behavior. So, for instance, managerial implication would be strategies that encourage consumers to regularly and intentionally show that they are buying second-hand clothes for their children. So, like incentives for social media posts, referral-based prizes, etc. I know that in some countries that would not work, but in Brazil we like to take pictures showing ourselves. So yeah, so I mean, oh, I just bought this in the second-hand store now for my child, you know. So this would work as something, and it would build upon the causal path of subjective norms driving this kind of behavior. So some final reflections, some methodological ones, but I just chose some here. So I'm really seeing the use of always trying to experiment with multiple fit ranges when you are FR scoring, because then you see if your model is robust in relation to the fit range that you've chosen. So this is something that's been really helpful. And also I think there is a good way forward in terms of network analysis and calculations, because there is a lot of work that they've done and the other side of the wall to try to identify what's something important in a network. And we have a network resulting from our score. And yeah, I always prioritize now a clear negated counterpart if it appears, because were my data to be ideal, that's what I would expect. So, and also faithfulness, I didn't put here, but faithfulness is something that's becoming important to me. And finally, some challenges and future developments, and this I wrote together with Julio, so you have a business eye here, okay? What Julio, for instance, would expect for CNA to become more applicable in his context, for instance. So real-time analysis updates, and this is something that everyone from every company that I talk to, they say, okay, that was great, but while you were doing the analysis, we have more like hundreds of rows in our data set, so you have to go through all of this again to suggest what the model is, etc. So in some way enable automatic reanalysis as new data become available, allowing continuous model refinement. If we embed like the rules that we've used to select the first model, then it could say, okay, if you keep the same rules, then this would be the next model, etc. Model robustness for predictive purposes. So develop methods to test the stability and generalizability of CNA models when applied to new or future cases. Handling data imbalance and fragmentation. So, I mean, we are already trying to do this, but yes, in business context, my experience is that it's much more present than in my research studies, for instance, the fact of imbalance in the factors. Some kind of automated sensitivity analysis to systematically test how model outcomes respond to changes in calibration thresholds. So this was one point at the health insurance company, because they were like, okay, this result was very nice, but if we change the calibration for this item of the customer satisfaction survey, would the model be another one, you know? And then I said, yes, maybe. So they were like, okay, that's no problem, but we would like to know more clearly. And they are used, for instance, with decision trees from artificial intelligence. And decision trees kind of make the break by just looking at the data. Like, you go to this branch if the raw data is above a certain given value, and you go to this other branch if the raw data is below. So this kind of branching of the original values is something that they would expect. And finally, simplified aggregation of multi-value conditions, such as Ed always says, like where is the difference making really occurring when we work multiple value conditions, and the incorporation of expert knowledge. So as I said, they don't like models that perform lower than 75% in anything, because again they say, okay, between this and my experience, I prefer my experience because I know more. As I put here, I know more than I can measure. So yeah, that's it. So it was more to exemplify our first attempt to try to make CNA inform real-world decision-making involving money in business context. And thank you.